Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Speak the Truth podcast. I'm your host, Matt Tardio. Russia, Venezuela, China, all of it is being intertwined as the U.S. is rumored to have deployed U.S. Special Operations troops down in the Caribbean in preparation for what looks like it's going to be an inevitable attack on Venezuela. Iranian oil has been caught moving back and forth between Venezuela and China. China's came out in the international community, and the United States is getting into it in the UN with Iran. All that and more is going to be explained today as we move through today's episode. Now, before we get into that, ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, I have a very sad announcement to make. Over inside of Ukraine, a good follower of this channel and good friend of many of you guys, somebody that's been around for a very long time, somebody that's spoken on this podcast, somebody that's giving you guys inside information, somebody that has supported other members of this community, including family members and other supporters of this channel, has fallen in battle over inside of Ukraine. Sean McVeigh, better known to most of you guys as Goldfish, ended up dying on December 12th, 2025. He was killed in action. Not only did he serve in the Ukrainian Special Forces, a member of Chosen Company prior to that, and he also served in the United States Army, deploying over to Afghanistan. Was given the details of the operation and how he ended up passing away, what happened to Goldfish. And I will tell you that the man was leading from the front and did his job as anybody else can truthfully expect. This news actually came out over this last weekend that Goldfish ended up getting killed. His family's hurting, community's hurting. I know a lot of you guys are out there probably hurting by this news and this information, and I just wanted to number one, offer a moment of silence to him, and then also ask that you guys just bow your head in prayer for his family as we take part in that moment of silence. He was a great man. He was a great friend. He was a good human being, great warrior for the United States of America, and ultimately died fighting against communist aggression. He's going to be greatly missed, and it's a sad day before we get into everything else. So please take that moment of silence. Well, this honestly couldn't have came at a worse time. We are going to be talking about Russia today and a lot of the crap that they're getting themselves into, because it's not just, how do I want to say this? It's not just the peace deal with Ukraine that's currently ongoing that we're kind of worried about. Excuse me for a sec. It's not just a peace deal. God dang it, man. All right, we'll get into that here in just a little bit. I want to bring up and I want to warn you guys about a different threat that we are worried about today. Dang man, that sucks. All right, here we go. Get it together, Matt. Get your freaking head back in the game. Come on, buddy. It's sad, man. You know, it's really sad when it just cuts deeper, I think, for a lot of us. All right, back in the game. I wanted to warn you guys, today is Christmas Eve and we have other things that are coming up and that you guys need to be warned about. I've talked to you guys about like this ongoing terror threat over here in the United States before we move into Venezuela and everything else. And I want you guys to be able to keep your head on a swivel today when you're out in public. Yesterday, I believe it was yesterday, Grant Stinchfield ended up putting out this warning, and I want you guys to hear it.
I want you to listen to me, and I want you to listen to me very closely. As we head into Christmas, it's imperative that you keep your head on a swivel. My sources inside the intelligence community are telling me that this year, beyond most other years, they are very concerned of a massive attack on the United States and multiple targets. I've been told what these targets are, but I've been asked not to reveal them, as to let the investigation play out so they can ultimately thwart these attacks. But I want you to be aware of this, because it's scary times we're living in. So why is this happening now, when President Trump is literally beating and weakening all of our enemies? Well, I believe what's happened is President Trump weakens ISIS and Al-Qaeda, weakens Venezuela, weakens Russia and China, weakens the narco traffickers, weakens the cartels. All of these groups are now coming together. They're joining forces, and they're creating what I would call a super axis of evil. Because each individual entity is weaker than it's ever been, it knew the only way to power back is to join forces with each other. So you've got Venezuela working with the cartels, and the cartels working with the Chinese, and the Chinese working with Russia, and everybody working together to wage war on America. President Trump is well aware of this. So just be vigilant, and just know that President Trump is weakening our enemies, but they're doing everything they can do to hang on. And nothing would be sweeter for them than to launch this giant attack over our most precious holiday, Christmas, and then, of course, into New Year's. So be aware. Any information I get, I will let you know about it. I will inform you about it when the time is right. God bless all of you.
See, some of you guys are saying FBI has failed to warn the American public. No, I don't think that's the case. I think, like, the FBI in the United States of America don't want the public to go into absolute panic as we go into the holiday season, because of what ended up happening last year. If you guys remember last year, we ended up having the terror attacks that ended up taking place on January 1st. Now, that within itself is a little bit troubling, but it's a heck of a lot more troubling when I bring up information like this that ended up taking place. I'm going to explain why this is troubling here in just a sec. You had an active shooter report at Walmart over inside of Wilmington, North Carolina, just a few hours ago, like an hour and a half ago, maybe 2 hours ago, max. All right, they ended up having this active shooter threat that ended up getting called in. Police responded to determine it was a false alarm. Ended up not, really amounting to anything. Well, I have news for you guys about this particular area and why this call in particular is of troubling concern for me. All right, over inside that area, you have the Wilmington Seaport. To the best of my knowledge, Wilmington Seaport handles. By the way, we're talking like half an hour away from this location. Okay, we're not talking about like hours upon hours. We're not talking about like a huge drive away. We're talking about a very close proximity to where this stuff is going down. This is, again, Wilmington, North Carolina. It was a false active shooter threat that ended up getting called in. Now, the other thing that goes on over at that port is you have the largest munitions port in the world operated by the United States military. And you also have what is rumored to be where our U.S. naval vessels end up going over and offloading their like nuclear waste and stuff. It ends up getting loaded on a rail line and then going back out to the places where that stuff gets disposed of. And that's actually likely where we ended up having the, rumored to be nuclear leaks over inside of North Carolina during the hurricane that ended up, poisoning a bunch of the rivers and the land and stuff like that. All of that nuclear waste likely ended up coming off of a train that could have been coming from this location, or it could have been coming from numerous power plants and things like that. So the fact that this ended up popping up early this morning, I think it was 8:30 a.m. local, if I remember right, when the call ended up coming in. Police responded, ended up clearing the area, and ended up finding nothing. So I say this because I want you guys to be able to keep your heads on a swivel today with everything that's coming out. Again, it's rumored that these things are supposed to be happening. So just, if you just carry a damn gun. All right. Old Man Weiss says, keep an eye fact and personal protection at all times. 1000%, man. Fox McCloud says, word on the street is that Nigerian Christians are going to be attacked. They've been getting attacked for a while now, but something horrific seems to be coming. Right. Yeah. I saw that the Christians over in Nigeria were supposed to be getting attacked as well. And that within itself, ties into kind of like the greater part about what I'm about to start talking about when it comes into why Venezuela is such a big deal, why Trump chose, of all places, all right, Venezuela in order to go after this, why he's talking about Nigeria within itself, for the Christians being under attack there. There's actually the regime over inside of Syria, and yeah, I'm going to go ahead and call him a regime inside Syria, is actually back at it again. They're actually going after and murdering Druze and Christians again. And it's like the formalized military. It's not anybody in the street. So why is it that we are so focused on Nigeria? Why is it that we're so focused on Venezuela? Well, before I talk to you guys about Nigeria, and I explained to you guys that they have a very large lithium deposit, could be the largest deposit in the world, but easily the largest deposit over on the continent of Africa. Elon Musk years ago had actually put in a bid to begin mining and producing that material, but ultimately China ended up getting the deal instead. And so now China is in charge of all the lithium over inside of Nigeria, and now President Trump wants to go after Nigeria. And, before when we were talking about it, we're like, well, why is it that he's so pissed off about the lithium? And we're thinking, well, maybe it's for like critical minerals, maybe it's for the metals, maybe it's for like the U.S. industry and things like that. But I actually think it's something a little bit more, which is Chinese and Russian influence being, projected across the Middle East. And all of this is coming at a time when over the weekend, Israel ended up warning the United States about a potential attack by Iran. So Israel's worried about Iran attacking it. United States is going after Venezuela, and we are also concerned about Nigeria all at the same time. I want you guys to take a listen to what took place over inside of the UN yesterday.
Since you decided to address the President of the United States, would like to make it clear to the entire world that the United States remains available for formal talks with Iran, but only if Tehran is prepared for direct and meaningful dialogue. Direct and meaningful. We're not going to negotiate in public, of course, not here. We have been clear, however, about certain expectations for any arrangement. Foremost, there can be no enrichment inside of Iran, and that remains our principle. I've worked for President Trump in 2 administrations now, and I can tell you, in both administrations, President Trump extended the hand of diplomacy to Iran. But instead of taking that hand of diplomacy, you continue to put your hand in the fire. Step away from the fire, sir, and take President Trump's hand of diplomacy. It's extended to you.
We appreciate any fair and meaningful negotiation, but insisting on zero enrichment policy, it is contrary to our rights as a member of the NPT.
So, what did we just hear? We just heard the United States warn Iran and told them to take out our hand in peace because what's going to happen is not going to be good. We bombed the crap out of Iran back in June. We dropped one of our largest non-nuclear, like the largest, if I remember right, the largest non-nuclear weapon in our arsenal. A 30,000 freaking pound bunker buster designed specifically to destroy that facility that the United States has been working on for almost 20 freaking years. We ended up dropping it on them. Not just one, multiple. We depleted over like half of our arsenal on those bastards. And right now it's rumored that Iran is rebuilding the Fordow nuclear site deeper underground in order to keep it, out of the reach of the United States of America, as if we probably don't have something else underneath our sleeve in order to destroy that sucker. And we do. And now Iran is going in front of the UN stating that they are going to continue to enrich uranium, which, if you remember right, before we ended up bombing Iran, it was zero uranium enrichment. Now Iran is coming out and saying they are going to continue to enrich uranium. Now, Iran's also tied into Venezuela. Iran's also tied into China and into Russia. And we know they got ties over in Nigeria as well. And so we're going to continue to break this stuff down for you because we got new developments of what the Trump administration in the United States did. But until then, I want you to finish listening to what Iran ends up saying about this situation.
And it means that they are not pursuing the fair negotiation. They want to dictate their predetermined intention on Iran. Iran will not bow down to any pressure and intimidation. And we are not going to blackmail to the body in international field. Thank you.
Oh, so you're not going to give in to international pressure. Weird. Because they most certainly did the last time when we ended up bombing the freaking brakes off of them and ended up like destroying their most prized nuclear facility that they were hiding underground. And Iran was lying about the amount of uranium that they were actually enriching. IAEA found out that they were enriching up to 87%. 87% is what they found evidence that Iran was enriching to. Now, I want you to think about that. There is no use for 87% enriched uranium other than you're like attempting to build nuclear weapons. That's it. And Iran is affirming it like within themselves, providing absolutely zero evidence whatsoever, trying to claim that they have I don't know, every single right in order to do what they're doing. And they have no like aspirations to build nuclear weapons. And we know that's false, right? Now, on top of that, obviously the U.S. has seized multiple oil tankers. Yesterday, I laid out a very good case for why those oil tankers are being operated by the IRGC, but now more information on that has came out. Well, China went over into the UN and complained about that yesterday as well. So now China is now entering the chat, and they're not so happy about it either.
The U.S. practice of arbitrarily seizing other countries' vessels grossly violates international law. China opposes unilateral illicit sanctions that have no basis in international law or authorization of the UN Security Council. We stand against any move that violates the purposes and principles of the UN Charter and infringes upon other countries' sovereignty and security, and all acts of unilateralism and bullying. Venezuela has the right to independently develop mutually beneficial cooperation with other countries, and we believe that the international community can understand and support Venezuela's stance of defending its own legitimate rights and interests. Next one, please.
Interesting. So China is number one, reaffirming Venezuela's ability and right in order to partner with it, whoever the hell it wants, but they're also claiming ownership over some of these ships. So I want you to think about that for a minute, because U.S. has targeted these ships because of ties to the IRGC and sanctions and everything else that ended up getting thrown on them. And China says, no, these belong to us. And there is your tie right there in between the two. And China is getting very, very ticked off. Yesterday, information ended up coming out that China is loading up to 1,000 nuclear weapons into silos up near the what do you call it, Mongolian border. ICBMs, loading them up. They're talking about, situations with Japan, several other, but on the same day that they're complaining about this is when the Pentagon starts getting information that that's happening. Interesting. So China is claiming responsibility for those ships and all of that's happening. And meanwhile, Venezuela is also coming out and complaining about this as well. Mary Dean says, Matt, I'm sorry for your loss. Holidays aren't great for me. Tomorrow will be 39 years since my grandma passed away. 2 days after Christmas, 2 months before I turned 13, my dad passed away. Mary Dean, I'm sorry. It's not a loss for me, to be honest, but there is, he is obviously a loss to me, right? And I feel that every tiny bit. But there is a lot of people in here that are feeling the loss a lot greater than me. I promise you that, and they're just not vocal about it. And I just want to make sure that we properly recognize that. Texas says, did you see that one of the ships the U.S. seized had a Russian crew running? Heard about that. Hadn't exactly seen any official confirmation on that. And I talked about, those ships that ended up getting seized actually, having Iranian weapons on them is some other information that I ended up hearing as well. This is Venezuela's response to everything that's going on. And I want you guys to be able to listen to it. It's a little bit of a longer clip, but I want you guys to listen to what this guy's saying. And I'm going to actually speed up. I'm going to actually speed this up because he talks a little slow in it, but I want you guys to listen to what he says.
We're in the presence of a classic example of war propaganda. There's no connection whatsoever with reality. There's no evidence, nor any need to present it. Just a repetition of incoherencies in the hope of confusing and creating a fog that allows aggression. One of the greatest creators of the propaganda used by the U.S. government during the invasion of Iraq put it very clearly, and I quote, "We are now an empire, and when we act, we create our own reality. And while you study that reality, we will act creating other realities which you can study too. And that is how things will sort out. We're history's actors, and you, all of you, will be left to just study what we do." End of quote. Mr. President, today the masks have come off. All the toxic excuses used to poison public opinion are confronted with a harsh reality of senior U.S. government officials announcing their real objective. It's not drugs, it's not security, it's not freedom. It is oil, it's the mines, it's the land. On the 16th of December, the President of the United States stated that, and I quote, "Venezuela is completely surrounded by the largest naval force ever assembled in the history of South America. It will only get bigger, and the shock to them will be like nothing they've ever seen before until they return to the United States all the oil, land, and other assets they stole from us."
Yep, Trump absolutely said that. Oil, land, and assets that they ended up stealing from us. So the question is, why would Trump be doing that? Well, because if Trump wanted to go to war with Venezuela for any other reason other than sanctions that are already approved and backed by judges and laws that allow us to target terrorists, well, that would require an act of war, wouldn't it? For Trump to be able to come out and state that that's exactly what we're doing, you would want congressional approval. But by doing simple things like targeting narco terrorists and going after sanctioned ships, we actually end up putting a crush in this. And if Venezuela is pushed to the point that they actually end up attacking the United States, then we have a very, very lawful reason to then go after Venezuela, particularly Maduro, particularly the military, the ports in which they're launching from, any of the attack points in which that stuff could have came from. It opens up a whole new wide range of self-defense packages that the United States of America can actually use in order to, enforce these sanctions out on international waters. So when Trump comes out and he talks about, going after the oil for all of these specific reasons, that seems to be a very surface rule, all right? Because the bottom line is, and I'm about to lay it out for you, is you have the IRGC operating Chinese vessels, or so they claim, that's picking up oil, selling it to China, and laundering money that's funding this nuclear weapons program for the IRGC and also funding terrorism. And we're very much worried about the rat lines and what those different boats are carrying here into the United States of America or over into South America that could potentially attack the United States on its home soil. And so I think what Trump is doing, what the Department of War is doing, what a lot of people are privy to, but they're just not saying out loud, is that the United States is conducting this war against Venezuela through legal channels, saying that we're going after sanctions and we're going after narco terrorists, when the reality is we're worried about China, the IRGC, Iran getting nuclear weapons, because now we're ramping up our rhetoric against Iran. We might end up bombing Iran yet again. And I told you guys back then, if Iran didn't agree to like zero production or zero enrichment of uranium, that we're going to end up going after them. Well, they're now openly stating that they're not going to do that, that they are going to continue to enrich uranium, that is their sovereign right. China and Russia are both backing them. And guess who's also backing Venezuela? China and Russia. China's pissed off because they're losing a lot of freaking oil out of this. Iran's pissed off because they're losing a lot of revenue that's funding their nuclear weapons program. And Russia, well, they're like in the mix just to destabilize the United States of America because of the war on Ukraine.
All of which must be returned immediately, end of quote. On 17th of December, White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller stated that the entire Venezuelan oil industry belongs to the United States and demanded its return. On the 20th of December, Secretary of War Pete Hegseth noted that the blockade against Venezuela will remain in full force until our country returns the allegedly stolen assets to the United States. All this means that the U.S. government is claiming the world's largest oil reserves as its own, in what would be one of the greatest acts of plunder in human history. This absurd claim confirms that there is no limit to the U.S. government's addiction to oil, and that all the excuses given in relation to our country have been part of a smokescreen. It is a plan of conquest and colonization that has no place in the 21st century, an extortion plan that demands that we hand over our country and our heritage in exchange for U.S. troops not firing on our people.
So what he's doing here is he's laying out groundwork that's completely opposite from what they're actually doing. Now, he's using the exact statements from the President of the United States, from his chief officers and everybody else, and pushing back on that, and rightfully so, because, I mean, quite frankly, it's asinine that the United States would be doing all of this against Venezuela just over, some drugs and also for some oil from back in the 60s that we think that they owe to us. R. White says, can we rename some of the Coast Guard ships to the Black Pearl and the Flying Dutchman? No, but I got a feeling if that letters of marque ends up getting passed, like the Flying Dutchman and the Black Pearl are going to be on the side of about half a dozen ships floating around the Caribbean and South America, just knocking out narco terrorists left and right. And I told you guys that there is now more information that's coming out about where all of this funding and money is coming from. It's no longer just me that's saying this stuff that was able to connect the dots. We've now got Newsweek over in Argentina and several other media outlets, including Spanish ones that would be from Spain, that are reporting on this, that Venezuela allegedly created a covert financial structure to divert millions of dollars to Iran. You guys see it. It's a headline right up there, over there on the screen, and they end up laying all of this stuff out, right? And it flows just as I told you. The Chavista regime has allegedly developed a financial structure to divert public resources from Venezuela to Iran. The Caribbean country has reported by the Spanish newspaper ABC function as a financial and logistical platform that covertly managed to evade sanctions and move capital towards key sectors such as energy, infrastructure, and also areas of joint use with possible military objectives. What they're hinting at there is that nuclear weapons program and the funding of terrorism via the IRGC. That's what they're talking about. The investigation added that this practice was also being used to channel payments to third countries such as Spain through businessmen and acting as intermediaries by national funds and blah, 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 blah. They lay out the history of it. Between 2006 and 2009, Caracas and Tehran signed at least 279 cooperation agreements on issues such as oil, petrochemicals, industry, banking, and technology, which generated a trade exchange between the two exceeding $6 billion. Ladies and gentlemen, that has grown exponentially since then. And you're talking about a lot that's going over into there. In 2008, Iran opened the International Development Bank in Caracas, a subsidy of its export bank. And a year later, in 2009, the opening of a joint bank in Tehran with a base amount of $200 million. And this is where I want you guys to start paying attention, because if you guys remember and you refer back, in 2019, Trump actually opened up his mouth and started speaking directly out against Maduro. We also saw former U.S. Army Green Beret contracting company that had gone over into Venezuela the following year, and allegedly under the direction, right, of the first Trump administration, or with the backing of the first Trump administration, in an attempt to overthrow the Maduro regime. He ended up getting busted. Numerous of his guys ended up getting killed. People spent, I think it was years in jail before they ended up getting released. And now the Trump administration is actually going after that particular guy. But listen here, in 2019, it attempted to transfer over $1 billion from Bandi's to its subsidy in Uruguay. This move exposed how foreign currency was being siphoned out of Venezuela through secondary financial channels. Researchers estimate that Venezuela channeled approximately $7.8 billion to Iran through these operations. Of that amount, about $4.689 billion was directly related to joint projects in sectors such as energy and petrochemicals, while another $3.1 billion resulted in indirect diversions. When they say energy sector, what they are referring to is that nuclear energy sector. All right. That is what Iran is claiming is their energy sector, is the peaceful development, peaceful enrichment of uranium and all of that other crap that's going in there. And all of that is being done, being washed and laundered through Venezuela. I told you guys this crap, and finally it's coming out. And as soon as this stuff ends up hitting mainstream media, you're going to understand greatly why the United States is so freaking worried about what's going on down there. According to documentation, a large part of those funds ultimately benefited Iran's state-owned companies and the nation's Revolutionary Guard, the IRGC. Ladies and gentlemen, the IRGC, a foreign terrorist organization labeled by the United States, Canada, and several others. That money went to the IRGC. What did I tell you guys yesterday? IRGC is running, operating those ships, selling the oil over to China, and putting the money back in their freaking accounts. And there it is in black and white for you guys. Given this information, the United States Attorney Office proceeded to investigate Nicolas Maduro and several of his closest collaborators who have already been sanctioned by Washington and linked to the cartel of the Suns. That's what's happening. This has nothing to do with drugs, although it's beneficial to the United States of America, and it has everything to do with terrorism. It has everything to do with Iran developing nuclear weapons, everything to do with China and Russia. It's absolutely absurd that anybody wants to claim anything otherwise. And by the way, Iran's ramping up their rhetoric as well. Yesterday, Iran threatened to wipe Tel Aviv and U.S. bases in the Middle East off the map if we end up bombing or going after Iran again. And again, over inside of the UN, you had Iran coming out and reaffirming that they're going to continue to enrich uranium, that it is their right, they're doing it for peaceful means, peaceful reasons, and we have no need to intervene. And you have China stepping in. All of the countries that are involved in this little freaking swindle, you have China stepping in, trying to claim that the United States within itself is violating international law, and that they're violating China's sovereignty and Venezuela's sovereignty and everybody else. And the sheer fact is that this bastard that's up on your screen right here and all of his cronies over inside of Iran are the ones orchestrating all of this crap and shipping weapons over into Venezuela. Gary Bain says, nice hat, man. Thank you, Gary. Appreciate you, brother. If for all of you guys that want to sit back and scream that Israel's behind everything, well, here you frickin' go. You guys, quite literally, if you ask what country, what U.S. ally stands to get pummeled by Iran should they get nuclear weapons, it's Israel. And this last weekend, Netanyahu warned the United States that Iran was looking to attack them again. Yesterday, over in Iran, they ended up putting up a giant warning flyer over, and I forget the name of their stupid square. I'm just going to call it Jihad Square over in Iran. Ended up putting up another huge, massive billboard warning of more attacks. All of this isn't good for the United States either. Venezuela, Iran, Hezbollah, all of them. All operating over, like, inside of the country of Venezuela, you have China. Last night, unfortunately, that interview ended up getting taken down that I ended up doing with Corey from the GOAT Initiative. He ended up providing a lot of different documents of a lot of the different stuff that he found. A lot of different documentation. YouTube ended up pulling it down because it showed foreign passports, and that's bullying. That falls underneath their bullying policy. God forbid I show foreign passports of illegal immigrants that cross the United States of America. Apparently that's not okay here on YouTube. So I got to go edit it, upload, and then probably deal with a strike and several other things that they're going to be putting on this channel. But bottom line is, you know, even when he went to go visit Congress, I mean, he brought and spoke to Congress. He brought receipts. And on the different cell phones and everything that he had, one of the messages was to legitimately recruit spies here in the United States of America for the CCP. Said that he's on a Telegram channel that is showing pictures of like Navy shipyards and Navy warships and things like that. All of that crap crossing the border over here in the United States of America. That is a very serious threat. That's bigger than illegal immigration and illegal immigrants stealing some of our money. And so now with all of this stuff in mind, and you start thinking about the amount of illegals that poured across the border underneath Biden's reign, you can start to picture the amount of buttheads that are inside this country from these different foreign terror organizations from these different countries that are in the United States to do harm. It's so much, in fact, and I've talked to so many people, I think the Bureau is so busy trying to round up terrorists. Joe Kent said over 18,000 known or suspected foreign terrorists are here in the United States of America and entered underneath Biden. And a lot of them probably crossed illegally. We know over 2,000 of them got flown in with the botched withdrawal from Afghanistan. It's directly into the United States. We just let them in. So I want you to think how busy the Bureau is trying to track down 18,000 known or suspected terrorists in the United States of America. And then it makes perfect sense why DHS, CBP, ICE, all of them are casting such a large net in these different sanctuary cities across the United States, rounding up every single illegal immigrant that they can and deporting them back to where they came from. Because we don't know who these freaking people are. Absolutely not. We have no idea. And it makes perfect sense why now all of that's happening. So if you really look at this and you take a look at all of the things that are happening in the United States with the mass deportations that are going on, like CBP and DHS, like ICE rounding up as many people as humanly possible while trying to track down the worst of the worst, and understanding that our border was so insecure and that we have all of these terrorists that ended up pouring their way into the country, including Chinese spies that are just openly passing information back to China about stuff that's taking place on the U.S. soil. Well, now it makes perfect sense while they're doing that. And then we look at the hub of all of this crap over inside of our hemisphere, which is Venezuela, which is sending money back over to Iran via China and several other different like intermediary like money washing platforms. And that money is going to the IRGC and funding their nuclear weapons program. IRGC, very good friends with Russia right now. Iran, very good friends with Russia. China, very good friends with Iran. Also very good friends with Russia. And all three of those countries are the ones that are whining and complaining about all of this crap the most and starting this big, massive stink. The United States isn't backing down at all. Mike Waltz yesterday over inside the UN.
Why have sanctions either bilaterally, unilaterally, or backed by the international community if they're not enforced? Well, the United States under President Trump is enforcing them in international waters. Otherwise, they are just empty words.
He's not wrong. But I also think it's our cover, our reason, what we have to be able to be going after them. And again, that information continues to come out. And then we have another late development. Ended up seeing rumors of it yesterday. Hill ended up putting an article on it, kind of confirming it. Trump deploys quick strike specialized military forces within range of Venezuela. They're talking about the Osprey specifically. In addition to that, they're saying that, these aircraft are designed to transport U.S. Special Operation troops. Yeah, no kidding. And for those of you guys who are unaware of the Osprey, it's actually what's on the thumbnail. It's, how do you want to call it? It's a prop-driven airplane that converts basically into like hovering, almost like a helicopter. It's got all sorts of crazy freaking things that it can do. Castle Survival says, if, more so when, war breaks out, I think the CCP, Kremlin, and IRGC will have saboteurs doing to the United States what Ukraine did to Russia with hidden drones. Right. You are absolutely correct. Now, I want you to reference one of the very first things I ended up playing to you guys with Grant Stinchfield that was warning about terror attacks here in the United States going over this period of time. Like, that's a very real thing. Very real thing. So we're worried about terror attacks taking place, and like you just so quietly hinted at, like different cells being activated over here in the United States of America. What do you think those cells are doing? Where do you think they're coming from? Why do you think we ended up having one of our best nuclear scientists who got an award by the freaking president knocked off the other week right after the shooting at Brown University? Why do we think that happened? I honestly don't think that all of these things are random. We know for a fact that Russia, China, and Iran are influencing people here in the United States via the internet, trying to recruit them and forcing them and telling them to go out and conduct terror attacks, pushing them in order to do it. Online rapid radicalization is taking place at an entirely new level. Entirely new level. So all of this crap, ladies and gentlemen, is of great concern to you guys. And y'all need to pay attention. The writing's on the wall for everything that is set to come. And if you don't think that like the United States is concerned about what's taking place, oh, stop with the music. 2 carrier strike groups are now operating in the Western Pacific. That would be off the coast of the United States. Not because we're out looking for drugs, not because we're out doing anything crazy, but because we need to deter China. Chinese aggression from like interfering with our operations that we have taking place. So we have 2 carrier strike groups now that are dedicated for Chinese aggression. This is a hell of a lot bigger than drugs being moved from Venezuela into the United States of America. How the American people can't see this is way beyond me. That announcement ended up coming out, 2 days ago? I think that we have them going down, and you take a look on top of the Ospreys that ended up getting deployed down there. All right. It was the 27th Special Operations Wing from the 160th SOAR, rumored to be going down there, that like ended up moving the Ospreys. And again, here's a look at all of the military that's basically allocated to this mission down there. Look at that. Do you honestly think that we dedicated that much of the United States military to go down and to take out a couple drug runners and to seize a couple boats? No, not at all. Iwo Jima Amphibious Readiness Group, air assets, including F-35s, B-2s, all sorts of bombers, all sorts of refueling aircraft, F-22s, naval assets. It's insane the amount of stuff we have down there. Adam DLC says, what would happen if another country seizes a shipment of money we're sending to the Taliban, pretty much applying the same logic we're using in Venezuela? Truthfully, the American people would frickin' celebrate. Why we're still sending that money over there, I have no idea. But I'm pretty sure we're just flying it directly to them. I think that's what we're doing. I think we're just flying that money directly to the Taliban. So it's not like it's being pushed out there, but it would be kind of cool in order to see that happen. Mary Dean, I would turn the ads off if I could figure out how YouTube ended up doing all of that crap, changing it. It's really freaking frustrating. Like I hate that YouTube ended up like changing up like the YouTube studio side of the house. So while I'm talking, you got to understand that I have to go into the backside and figure out how to deal with all that crap as well. And that's exactly what I'm doing as we're going over it, because I love you guys and I want to make sure that that's there. But they ended up making this such a huge pain in the butt for me to figure out on the backside. Oh, I did it. Yes. That way I can turn it back on afterwards because I love you guys so much. So there, Mary Dean, they should be turned off for you guys. This is the issue that we have over here. We have all of this crap that's being flown in there. All of this garbage being flown in. So what do? Well, we sit back and we wait because everything's ramping up and people are starting to get more about it. And if you don't think things are ramping up, I I'm going to take you guys away and I'm going to bring you back over. Give me a sec here. Let me get this map up on the screen for you because you know Matt loves his Google Maps because now we're getting back into war stuff. Everything's taking place down here in Venezuela, right down over here. Meanwhile, we're worried about what's taking place over inside of the Middle East. Again, all that oil and everything being shipped up over here. And then we've got to deal with Iran, who is, building those nuclear weapons and all of that other crap that the United States is currently concerned about. Now, Iran, and this is a brief understanding for those of you guys that haven't been following this channel for that long, Iran itself and the IRGC funds terrorism across the Middle East. All right. And clearly they've worked their way over into our hemisphere. Iran funds terrorism, not just in Iran, also over in Iraq, previously in Syria, heavily inside Lebanon, over inside Israel, rumored to be in Egypt, and all the way down inside Yemen, where the U.S. had a massive bombing campaign when we first started this entire thing. Last year, in Hezbollah, by the way, which is now operating mainly out of Lebanon because they got kicked out of Syria, was supposed to, in accordance with a peace deal, move their happy butts back north of the Litani River and disarm. And the Lebanese government was supposed to help them with that. And their time has kind of expired. And over this last month, Israel has been conducting bombings against Hezbollah pretty much on a daily basis. Iran came out with a statement yesterday talking about if the United States or if Israel tries to wipe Hezbollah off the map, it's not going to work. They're going to be coming out after them, like all sorts of crap, right? And having that statement that goes into it. Iran developing like these long-range ballistic missiles that might be carrying freaking all of that other crap. And oddly enough, all of this crap is directly tied into what's taking place over inside Venezuela and South America because it's where all of their money laundering is coming from. So now we're not just going after the weapons facility themselves. We're actually going after the funding that's feeding that garbage. And at the same time, they're funneling people up into the United States of America. So that's why it's such a huge problem for the United States. Castle Survival says my last message relates to the one before it, by the way. Oh, Castle, man, I ended up missing you, brother. I don't even know what I missed. Sorry. Let me go back here and check on that for you. Castle says, I don't think it'll be big yet, but they'll target things like data centers. You are correct. Massive damage with minimal cost, infrastructure, civilian comms afterwards. Yeah, it's Castle, not just data centers, man. Not just data centers, in my opinion, but also the cables underwater, right? So if we go back, and this is, again, why people in the United States need to be concerned. If we go back and we look at some of the things that happened right when the Houthis started taking off and attacking Israel, if I was to actually pull up the map, but you guys just take my word for this, all of the data centers and all of the internet and all of that stuff that's connected around the world is by fiber optic cables that get strung out and ran underneath the ocean in between like different continents and countries with different landing ports and everything else. Well, over here between the Gulf of Aden and the Red Sea, right where everything kind of squeezes together, as all of this started off, we ended up having some of those underwater cables that got blown up by the Houthis. Now, that's the Houthis doing that, and likely under direction of the IRGC taking care of it for them or helping them out with it. So I want you guys to think about this. If all this crap starts to pop off, I'm not so much worried about the data centers over inside the Middle East or cables that are stretching across the Pacific or Atlantic. I'm actually worried about a lot of the data centers that are over here in the Indo-Pacific region. All right. Like when we start looking at all of this crap that we bring up and we start talking about what's over here inside of these countries that are in very close proximity to China. There's different terror organizations and things like that China can get put off. And if they end up doing that, man, dude, I'm pretty sure we got banks and stuff like that have data centers over there. C88 coming in, gifting out 5 Speak the Truth memberships. Castle Survival. Yep. Got you. Thank you guys very much for all the gifts and donations. So that's the major concern when it goes into that. I mean, you're talking about greatly affecting the U.S. economy, but back to the situation at hand, do we see things that are escalating that would cause Iran in order to either A, attack Israel, or B, bring that stuff up, because that's what's going to cause the United States to ramp up things over inside of Venezuela. All right. That is the purpose of me putting all of that stuff on the map. And do we see things like that? Well, yeah, we do. We'll play.
طلع شوفي ماي طلع
This is one of many bombing campaigns that Israel has partaken in over inside of southern Lebanon. All right. They've been bombing the crap out of Hezbollah. And like they ended up coming out stating yesterday, they being the IRGC, they're not about Hezbollah getting wiped out. They're very good allies, and they funneled a buttload of money. They mainly propped up Hezbollah within themselves, and they lost their foothold over inside of Syria when Trump decided it would be a good idea to back Jelani. And we ended up seeing the collapse of the Assad regime, right? Hezbollah was fighting on the side of the Assad regime, who happens to be buddies with Russia. So if you go back to your map and you look at it and we start talking about Syria, right, this is that country that Jelani owns, and you guys can see it sits in between Iran and Israel. This was also the major hub for ISIS and a lot of other foreign terror organizations, and it was being ran by Assad. Last December, when the guy ended up skipping town and running away and Jelani ended up surrounding Damascus and taking it over, Assad jumped on an airplane and he flew his happy butt all the way up over into Mother Russia. Okay, so now he's hiding out somewhere in Russia with the likes of Jackson Hinkle and those other retards. All right, so we end up backing them, which ends up pushing Hezbollah out of Syria and over into Lebanon, and Israel is now bombing the living hell out of them. Castle Survival says, can we go briefly over Miramar? Haven't heard much. We can. I'll take a look into Miramar along with what's going on between Thailand and Cambodia as well, because Thailand is rumored to have bombed Cambodia this morning. Tom Bone says, Merry Christmas, everyone. And with all of the threats out there this year, please be safe. Right. You know, the simple fact is with these terror threats that we're facing here in the United States of America, there's so many players that have like teamed up. You know, a lot of people are thinking that you're going to hear someone shout Allah Akbar before a shooting ends up occurring. And that's just simply not the case. All right. When it comes down to these things, because of the amount of other nations that are all involved in this, ladies and gentlemen, it could be an American that's having his family held hostage that ends up causing these different things to take place. All right. Like there's several ways for all of this crap to go about and for it all to kick off. And so unfortunately, when you end up having nation states that are involved like Russia, China, Iran, you open up a whole new gambit of threats. ISIS is a big deal, sure, right? They're a big deal. And in my opinion, Russia is helping push information over to ISIS to allow them to conduct attacks. That's my opinion on that. And I can back that up with my own personal thoughts and beliefs. I think Russia is pushing them information along with some of these other terror organizations, such as the Islamic movement of Uzbekistan and a couple others. But at the end of the day, you really don't know who's going to be conducting these attacks. STRC says, Age of AI is going to destroy the world. Trombone put the AI race at the front of the war. World War III is not going to be physical. It's going to be tech-based. Correct. All right. When we see all this other crap going on, it doesn't make sense for Iran to try to figure out how to invade the United States or develop a ballistic missile to target the United States of America, or for even China to launch that, where they can simply go after our infrastructure networks that are all being based over there because of horrible policies and decisions that got made. You know, our cyber infrastructure is under immense threat just because of where it's positioned and how little control we have over all that crap. And our enemies know that stuff, and they're going to be using it. Right. And so when we see Trump going to war over inside of, you know, Nigeria, all the way down here, wanting to go to war with Nigeria down here because of Christians being slaughtered, you got to ask why he doesn't care about the Christians being slaughtered inside Syria or over inside Sudan or any of these other countries on the planet. And the only explanation that I can come up with is large lithium deposit. China ends up getting the bid on it. U.S. ends up getting like basically kicked out of the freaking area, and China is documenting and taking control of everything. That's what it certainly seems like. All right. As we look at all of this stuff, as we go into it, that's what it certainly seems like. On top of that, as we get it out, people are asking, there was a Russian oil tanker that was on the sanction list that ended up making its way over into Venezuela. Why didn't the United States go after that particular tanker? Seemed like it would have been a prime target to go after and actually get. Then we had it rumored the other day that Ukraine and Russia were again working on their peace deals, and they were very close to coming out with it. Zelensky ended up coming out. Yes, was it yesterday or a couple hours ago today? My brain's farting on it, but Zelensky just ended up coming out with all of his different points on that particular peace deal. Now, if that peace deal was to fall apart, then we're talking about immense amount of pressure, even more war, even more munitions and everything getting soaked up, being committed over to that fight while we're worried about Russia, Iran, and China in our own hemisphere. The United States could barely keep up with production for the Ukrainian war. Joe Biden ended up sending cluster munitions over there because we ran out of freaking like standard artillery shells. Biden's dumbass actually admitted it live on TV one day. He got asked a question, why are we sending cluster munitions over there? Seems kind of odd because you were condemning Russia for using cluster munitions. And Biden was like, man, we run out. So we're sending them what we got. No big deal. So I want you to think about that because those supplies are not built up overnight. They're just simply not. It's just not the case. It takes a long time in order to do that. So if for some reason this deal ends up going south between Ukraine and Russia, I think honestly, the United States is looking at this saying, you know what, Ukraine, you're going to have to bite the bullet on this because we got our own problems right now and we need our own munitions to defend our own freaking borders. We might have to go to war with Iran. We might have to go to war with China. And hey, it might benefit you because it's going to be soaking up all this other crap, especially if Russia is dumb enough to get involved. Adam DLC says, why are we selling AI chips to China then? Amazing question. I don't think we should be. I really don't, but they're stealing all of our tech anyways here in the United States. Demon AOC, love the work you put into your videos. Thanks, Matt. No, I appreciate you guys, man. I appreciate everybody that's in here watching. If you guys haven't yet, make sure you're subscribed to the channel because, again, we're going to be on top of this crap. So Visgrad24 ended up taking all of those points from Zelensky and kind of crunching them down into this. They're looking at confirmation of Ukraine's sovereignty from Russia, a non-aggressive pact signed between Russia and Ukraine. Ukraine will receive strong security guarantees, and they're talking about from the United States and the EU. Ukraine's peacetime armed forces will be limited to 800,000, and that's going to piss Russia off quite a bit. Russia wanted to limit their forces way lower than that. I'm trying to remember when I was debating what's his name, Scott Ritter, who is a Russian shill. Scott Ritter trying to claim that it was going to be like astronomically lower than that. But yeah, 800,000 is what he's trying to claim. Zelensky wants it to be. United States, NATO, and Europe provide Ukraine with security guarantees that basically mimic Article 5 of NATO. So if Russia actually goes after them, then everybody's going to be able to go after Russia and start attacking them. That's what Ukraine wants. Then it gets into, in the event of a new Russian invasion, military response and the reimposition of sanctions will follow. Russia enshrines a policy of non-aggression towards Europe and Ukraine and all relevant legislation, which is good. Ukraine becomes a member of the EU within a predetermined timeline. So Ukraine wanted to join the EU. That was one of the biggest issues that ended up causing the coup all the way back in 2014. Was you had a president who likely had a freaking fraudulent election, or not likely, they ended up discovering that the election was fraudulent. 100%. International community ended up determining it, but it was too late because the other guy had already seceded the election. And the president at the time wanted to basically move closer ties with Russia, while the vast majority of the population said, to hell with that, you need to start moving towards the EU. We're tired of being underneath Russia's thumb. That's where you end up getting this huge separation over in the East, along with Russia moving in there and all sorts of other crap, right? So yeah, they want to become a EU member. They want to join the EU for rightful reasons, and that is going to be a black eye for Putin as well. Formation of a global development package to be defined in a separate investment agreement. Creation of several funds for Ukraine's reconstruction totaling $800 billion. Obviously, they want Russia to front the freaking money for that because they started this entire war. Free trade agreement between Ukraine and the United States. Ukraine will not seek nuclear weapons. Okay. They ended up giving them up anyways. Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Big freaking sticking deal. Technically underneath Russian occupation or control, while surrounding territory, not so much. U.S. proposes trilateral management with a key role for the American side. Kyiv's option is a joint U.S.-Ukraine management on party basis. Why? Because Russia wants to use this sucker in order to send electricity to all of the different areas that they're currently occupying. 13, introduction of educational programs in schools aimed at developing tolerance, intercultural understanding, and eliminate racism and prejudice. Well, that's probably going into Russia's accusation of Nazis and all other crap over in Ukraine. 14, you start breaking into the territorial issue, and they break this down quite extensively by region. I'm not going to do it for you guys, but the big part is Russia needs to withdraw from several different regions, including Mykolaiv, Sumy, Kharkiv, Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson. Right? Russia demands Ukraine withdraws from Donetsk. U.S. proposes a compromise in the form of a free economic zone if there is no agreement on the "we stay where we are" principle. The free economic zone option is possible only through a referendum in Ukraine. That is true. Russia and Ukraine commit not to change the agreements by force. Russia will not obstruct Ukraine's use of the Dnipro and the Black Sea for commercial activity. Kind of common sense. All in all, prisoner exchange. They want everybody swapped, not a one-for-one. Trade everybody back. Ukraine's committed to holding elections as soon as possible after the agreement is signed, and the agreement will be legally binding and monitored by a peace council chaired by the U.S. president. After all parties have agreed to the stated conditions, a regime of a full ceasefire enters into force immediately. That's what they're looking to do. And you can imagine what a tall order that is going to be in order to accomplish it. And if the U.S. is brokering this crap in between Ukraine and Russia, and we go in and we seize a Russian oil vessel, although it's sanctioned and we believe we have the legal right to do so, that's going to piss Russia off, and it's probably going to end up resulting in the war being drawn out even further. Tom Bone says the worst thing the West ever did was to lift the trade embargo against China. We literally funded their rise to become our greatest enemy. Agreed. Myanmar, this stream or next? Thought I'd ask. It's definitely not going to be this stream, Castle Survival. I just don't have everything prepped for it. Mac says, what are your thoughts on the Eastern deterrent line being built in the Baltics? It has to happen. Has to happen. Russia aggression over there. And this was, I'm going to say, working with NATO partners over inside of Ukraine some years ago. Talking about Russia within itself, prior to this massive Russia invasion over inside of Ukraine. There's a huge fear over there, and I think there's sound reason to believe, including, drones and different assets and things like that have been flown over or attempted to penetrate lines of some of those nations, that there is a very real and credible fear that Russia is going to try to do to some of these smaller countries what they've done to Ukraine. And if that's the case, it needs to be protected against. In my opinion, it's no different than the U.S. developing a border down on the southern border. There's no reason to have huge open terrain and everything else. No, we need to have an actual defensive line. And when you talk about Russia, in the case of Russia, and look at what you're actually defending against, you're not talking about illegal immigrants flooding into the country. You're talking about a full-blown military invasion. Russia has proved itself willing and able to invade other nations that are going to be friendly to the West. They need that. They need to have that deterrent over there. So, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you guys understand after watching this entire thing, it's not just about Venezuela. It's not just about oil. It's not just about drugs. There's a whole system that's in play on a global stage. The United States isn't going to end up deploying 30+% of its freaking naval deployable assets down to Venezuela just because we don't like them, selling oil. That's not the case. All right. We've got a much bigger thing at play here, ladies and gentlemen, and it's time that everybody ends up waking up. Combat Care Bear. Holy freaking cowballs, man. Coming in and gifting out 50 Speak the Truth memberships. Holy freaking shnikes, Batman. That's a lot of Speak the Truth memberships that just got dropped in the chat, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much, Combat Care Bear. Really, I really do appreciate it. And ladies and gentlemen, I want to ask you guys again, one last time, moment of silence. Please, 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 please do not forget and bow your heads in memory of Goldfish. American fought for this country, went over to fight communist aggression over inside of Ukraine, and has been crushing souls over there for years. And sadly, he lost his life. He was a Speak the Truth member. He was a supporter of this channel, and he was a great supporter of the community here on this channel. When Ethan ended up losing his life and his family ended up getting his body back, not only did he help come in and talk about what was taking place and push support for his family and having fought beside Ethan as well, not only did he do all of that crap, but he also ended up supporting Ethan's family, who's a great American. He's an actual true patriot, somebody that actually understood that the United States doesn't just bow down to communist aggression. And even though the United States isn't committed to that fight, he certainly was. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you guys to have a blessed Christmas Eve. I want you guys to have a blessed Christmas. And again, please take a moment of silence for our friend.